So why was the near blackouts in Alberta a cautionary tale for the city of Ottawa? I don't think a lot of people are even aware that there were blackouts in Alberta. I wasn't aware until we talked.
Yeah, there were some small local blackouts, but overall the province dodged the bullet, okay? What happened is, for the first time ever, they actually put out news releases like this, for example: Albertans asked to conserve power to minimize potential for rotating outages. And this went out on people's cell phones, I understand, first time ever. And remember, this is a part of Canada that's supposed to be our energy capital, okay? This is an Alberta emergency alert issued by this group. The alert is in effect: extreme cold, I should have said extreme stupidity, but we'll get to that. Extreme cold resulting in high power demand has placed the Alberta grid at a high risk of rotating power outages to steam things. Albertans are asked to immediately limit their electricity use to essential needs only. So you just have to say, how is it that the center of our oil sands, the center of so much of our energy sources, ended up with almost power blackouts, okay? You'll see how close they came. It was only because other provinces and a couple of northern states helped them. This group here, called Green Energy Alberta, and they're trying to tell us that, of course, it's important to go green. They actually show us what happened during that period. Okay, now the light green is natural gas. This is the amount of electricity coming from each source. Okay, and we're going from January 12th all the way up to the 17th. Now, I wanted to point out a couple of things that happened around midnight on the 12th, okay, the 12th of January. And it was cold. I mean, it was into the minus 30s. And let's see what the breakdown was. And first of all, before I switch to the next slide, wind power is the dark green. Wind power is the dark green, and you can see occasionally it does produce a reasonable amount of energy. Solar is the yellow, and coal is the gray, which is very consistent. This is something really important to notice, and Ottawa doesn't seem to get it, is that for these sources like natural gas and coal, they're very consistent. They don't care about the weather, okay? They're always giving approximately the same amount of electricity. Their capacity factor, in other words, the ratio of what they actually give to what they are rated at, is nearly 100%. Okay, nuclear is pretty close to 100, but Alberta doesn't use nuclear, at least not in this way. So let's zoom in on what happened around midnight on January 12th. This is very scary when you consider that Ottawa wants to get rid of all of our natural gas.
Oh my God.
Okay, they want to get rid of it all and run the city on wind and solar. So here's what happened just before midnight between the 11th and 12th of January. Look at wind. Wind was providing all this, and then it went to virtually nothing. Now, there are two reasons for that. First of all, because the wind, when it gets very cold, usually the wind dies off. But also at minus 30, they have to turn the wind turbines off. They have to feather the blades because they become brittle. Okay, all the different components, and you're risking an explosive failure of the wind turbines if you try to run them below minus 30. So it went down to just about zero, okay? Now, the interesting thing is, if we actually look at what happened on each wind farm, these are all the wind farms. And the temperatures in the region, okay, were in the neighborhood of minus 28 to minus 30, where these wind turbines were in southern Alberta. The circle shows that in all these cases, there were a few that were still generating some power, but in all these cases, they went to zero. Okay? There's a blow up. You can see all those wind turbines went to zero. Now, the thing that's kind of amazing about this is Alberta built up a huge amount of wind and solar power in an effort to fight climate change. Okay? And that's why the climate issue is driving so many dumb decisions around the world. Instead of building more natural gas or coal stations, they built wind power. Okay? So they had lots of potential power. Their megawatts were high, but the problem was their capacity factor is so low. So the actual amount of energy being generated was very tiny. And that's what you see right here, okay? That very skinny green line. So what happened just a few days later is their capacity factor, well, I'll say it differently here. Temperatures across Alberta range from -40 in the north to -29 in the south. Their contingency reserve, which is the last column, how much extra that they have that they're not using, fell to 0 on every single energy source, okay? They were obviously solar. This is 5 p.m., 0 for solar, so that's not giving any electricity at all. This is the potential as to how much it could generate if everything was working fine. This is the amount that was actually generated, and this is the reserve, okay? How close did they come to 0 reserve? They're supposed to, by law, keep a 500 megawatt reserve. They went to 0 at 5:08 p.m. on January 14th. And so you have to ask, well, how did they power this? How did they power the province? Well, one of the things they did, very exciting, they got all their battery packs to work. Okay, battery packs, wow! Battery packs were put into action, providing 79 megawatts. And by the way, you can power about 500 homes with a megawatt. So that's like 40,000 homes. It looks pretty good for about 10 minutes. And that's the big problem with using batteries to back up solid, dependable energy sources, or in this case, wind and solar, which are not dependable, is that you drain the battery just boom, like that, okay? I have at home, my daughter bought a big lithium battery, a massive battery, and when I plug in the space heater, it drains it just overnight. And I don't know if you've seen the range decrease of electric vehicles when you drive them with the heater on. They're saying in this kind of weather like today, if you use your heater, you're going to get a 41% reduction in mileage, okay? Because, of course, they drain the batteries really quickly. So here you see energy storage. 190 megawatts was the potential, and that would include batteries plus probably some pumped storage. And this is the amount they were getting, but they had 0 reserve, okay? None. But what it doesn't show, of course, is that it was only for 10 minutes. So what they did, unfortunately, is they spent a lot of money building up, as you can see here, 4,481 megawatts of wind, 1,650 megawatts of solar, and that sounds really great. That's just the potential as to what they could generate if they were working. But they weren't. And you can see wind, for example, all those wind turbines, you add it all up, they were giving 129 megawatts out of a potential over 4,000. Okay, so way less than 1% of their potential output. And of course, being 5:08 p.m. solar was giving you nothing. So what Alberta did, and this is a big warning to Ottawa, is they, instead of building more natural gas and coal stations, they built huge amounts of wind and solar power, which didn't help them at all. And so Saskatchewan Power stepped in, and they provided 153 megawatts. They did get a little bit from the northern United States as well. And so even though their reserves dropped to 0, they didn't get rotating blackouts. There were some blackouts in some places because of equipment failure, but generally speaking, they didn't have blackouts. And it was because other people rescued them, because of their stupid decisions to try to run the province on wind and solar. And as Scott Moe said, and by the way, the CBC reported the first part of this, but they didn't report the second part of his tweet. I'd like to read that. The power was coming from natural gas and coal from Saskatchewan. And he says, the ones that Trudeau government is telling us to shut down, which we won't. Okay, so that's actually one of the main reasons that you're seeing this fight going on between Alberta, Saskatchewan, and the federal government, is because they want them to shut down the power that they actually needed when, of course, it was very cold. So that's the answer as to why we have to be concerned, because what is Ottawa planning to do? Oh, they're going to build lots and lots of wind turbines. What's your next question?
I was going to talk about what's happening in the city of Ottawa's climate energy plans, like what's ICSC doing to combat that?
Yeah, well, for sure. The city of Ottawa, even with our new mayor, have not dropped the wildly crazy plan that they developed under Mayor Watson. What they want to do is they want to run the city almost entirely on wind and solar power. They want us to convert almost entirely to electric vehicles. And this is what would happen. You know, here's Chrysler. This is just south of Ottawa, Chrysler, Ontario. And I think it'll run a little video here. There we go. This is what our streets are going to end up looking like. That's downtown Chrysler.
This is Chrysler, Ontario.
So, I don't know about you, but I'm not too keen on having these at the end of my street. They generate what's called infrasound, which is low frequency sound. And I have an interview with Professor Mariana Alves Pereira on our website, and you can check it out. And she's an expert in infrasound. You know, with the visible spectrum, with visible light, it's just a tiny sliver of the spectrum. You've got, X-ray, and you have gamma ray, and on the high energy side, and then you have lower frequency like radio and infrared and that sort of thing. Well, it's the same thing with sound, okay? We have a certain narrow band that we can hear. Above that are things like dog whistles, okay? Below that is what's called infrasound. And it's interesting because elephants and giraffes, whales, they can actually hear infrasound, which is one reason why we don't want to be putting these up into the ocean, because when they drive the pile drivers into the ocean bottom to build these wind turbines, it totally disorients the whales. They say it's equivalent to having a magnesium flare just dropped into this room, because the whales are just blinded. Their sonar is wiped out. So Ottawa wants to build 702 industrial wind turbines taller than the Peace Tower, if you can believe that. Okay, and this picture here actually gives kind of a representation of what they'll look like in comparison with a house. They are massive, okay? They are truly massive. And if you want to see what they look like around houses, just go to Chrysler, just south of Ottawa, or Finch, just south of Ottawa, and you can see what's coming here. They want 702 of these. They also want to have 36 square kilometers of solar panels, if you can imagine that. Here are the solar panels after a snowstorm. So you'd have to use lots of diesel-powered machinery to clear your solar panels. Okay, so they want to run our city on solar as well. And they want to have 122 large shipping containers of lithium batteries. Isn't that great? And we saw how long the lithium batteries helped them in Alberta. It was 10 minutes. So we're going to have 122 of these, Chris. And I don't know about you, but if they ever catch fire, oh boy, you're in big trouble.